It was a serene morning in the city of San Antonio, Texas, a tranquility that felt almost unnerving. The neighborhood was calm and predictable, the type of place where life moved at a leisurely pace, leading residents to believe that nothing harmful could ever occur. Yet, beneath this calm facade, unsettling truths often lay hidden. Sarah Mitchell stepped out onto the sidewalk, adjusting her hoodie and lacing up her running shoes. To the casual observer, she appeared to be just another jogger, blending into the morning routine of the city. However, Sarah was more than an ordinary woman. She was a selected judge, known for her tough but fair decisions that shaped lives in the courtroom. In this quiet neighborhood, though, she wasn't a judge. She was merely Sarah, enjoying a rare moment of peace before a day that would challenge her in ways she could scarcely imagine. As Sarah began her usual route down the tranquil streets, her footsteps created a steady rhythm against the pavement. This was her sanctuary, a time for reflection. Her thoughts drifted to the case she would presiding over that day, one that weighed heavily on her shoulders. It involved allegations of police misconduct and racial profiling, a subject that resonated deeply with her. She had meticulously reviewed witness statements and damning evidence, preparing herself to deliver a verdict that would force people to confront an uncomfortable truth. For now, however, she decided to push those thoughts aside, allowing the cool morning air to fill her lungs and the gentle sunlight to warm her skin. For a fleeting moment, the world felt perfectly right. A few blocks away, Officer Mike Johnson slouched in his patrol car, his coffee growing cold in the cup holder. He had patrolled this area for years, believing he knew every street and every face. He thought it was his duty to protect his community, ensuring it remained safe and orderly. However, Mike's perspective was flawed. Anyone who didn't fit his narrow view of who belonged there sparked suspicion. When he spotted Sarah jogging alone, her hoodie pulled over her head, and a small gym bag bouncing at her side, he narrowed his eyes. "Who's that?" he muttered to himself, leaning forward as his instincts kicked in. To Mike, she wasn't a jogger clearing her mind, she was someone who raised alarms. As Sarah paused near a park bench to stretch and hydrate, an engine idling nearby broke her moment of tranquility. She glanced back but thought little of it. Mike's scrutiny intensified as he noticed the something flutter to the ground. A receipt. Although he couldn't discern its origin, it fueled his growing suspicion. "What's she carrying?" he murmured, his mind jumping to conclusions. Sarah resumed her jog, oblivious to Mike stepping out of his patrol car. The sound of the door slamming shut seemed to pierce the calm morning air. "Excuse me, ma'am," Mike called out, his voice sharp and authoritative. Sarah stopped and turned to face him with a polite yet surprised expression. "Yes, officer." Mike's gaze dropped to the humbled receipt on the ground. "Can I ask what you're doing here?" he inquired. As people nearby began to glance over, curiosity evident on their faces, Sarah responded, "I'm out for a jog." Mike frowned, still fixated on the receipt. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, holding it up. Caught off guard, Sarah replied, "That's mine. I must have dropped it." Mike's expression hardened. "These are expensive items," he retorted, his tone laced with doubt. "What's in your bag?" Sarah's calm demeanor remained intact, but completing an intense investigation. Well, she understood where this was heading. "Officer," she said steadily, "I don't believe I've done anything wrong." Mike stepped closer, his voice sharpening. "If you're not hiding anything, then let me see the bag." Sarah hesitated. While she had nothing to conceal, she was aware of her rights. "You don't have probable cause," she replied, maintaining her composure. Mike's demeanor shifted to him, her confidence felt like defiance. The quiet street, once serene, now buzzed with mounting tension as bystanders pulled out their phones, eager to document the unfolding scene. As Mike's voice rose, demanding Sarah to turn around, she froze, recognizing the moment's gravity. She had witnessed situations like this before, where rights were disregarded, and assumptions devolved into accusations. "Officer," she said quietly, "you're making a mistake." Ignoring her, Mike grabbed her arm and pulled out his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for suspicion of theft and resisting an officer," he announced, loud enough for onlookers to hear. The cold metal cuffs snapped around Sarah's wrists as she stood silently, maintaining eye contact with him. "You have no idea what you're doing," she stated firmly. As Mike led her toward the patrol car, Sarah held her head high, her face composed. Bystanders began gathering, phones recording the arrest of a jogger, the officer barking accusations. Yet, none of them, least of all Mike, comprehended the what intent just transpired. Because the woman he had just arrested was Judge Sarah Mitchell, a federal judge with the power to bring significant changes. Mike's blunder would not only jeopardize his career but also unearth a truth far more significant than his own arrogance. Are you intrigued by this unfolding story? Share your thoughts in the comments below and consider subscribing to Change Weavers for more compelling narratives. As Sarah stood there, handcuffed and bewildered, the sunny morning felt like a distant memory. The crowd around her murmured, their phones capturing every moment, and a sense of unease rippled through the onlookers. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others exchanged glances, trying to understand how a seemingly ordinary jogger had found herself in such a predicament. Sarah's heart raced, but she remained composed, determined not to let fear overtake her. Officer Mike Johnson, now fully engrossed in the situation, took a step closer, his confidence overshadowing his judgment. "So, you're saying you just happened to drop this?" he asked, waving the receipt in front of her, his tone dripping with skepticism. Sarah could see the doubt etched on his face, a reflection of Elias's that often clouded judgment. "Yes, officer. I went to that store last week. The receipt is mine," she replied calmly, her voice steady despite the tumult inside her. Around them, a small crowd of people had gathered, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama. An elderly woman with a concerned expression whispered to her companion, "I can't believe this is happening. She doesn't look like a criminal." A young man, perhaps in his 20s, recorded the scene on his phone, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What's wrong with that cop? He's overstepping his authority," he murmured, shaking his head. Mike, feeling the pressure of the spectators, was unwilling to back down. "You don't look like you belong here. I'm not buying your story," he insisted, his voice rising slightly. Sarah's heart sank at his words, knowing all too well how assumptions could lead to devastating consequences. "I assure you, I'm just out for a jog," she reiterated, trying to maintain her calm. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, their expressions a mixture of sympathy and disbelief. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," Mike ordered, his voice firm and uncompromising. The tension in the air thickened as Sarah felt the weight of the moment. She had been in courtrooms where justice was served, where dignity was upheld, yet here she was, facing a situation that seemed to strip away both. "Officer, please," she started, but he cut her off. "You're resisting an investigation," Mike declared, his face hardening as he reached for his handcuffs. Sarah could feel the cold metal encircling her wrists, a stark reminder of the power imbalance at play. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly, her voice steady but laced with urgency. She knew her rights and understood the illuminates of this encounter. As Mike led her toward his patrol car, the onlookers began to murmur among themselves, their phones still recording. A woman in a bright red dress stepped forward, her voice rising above the crowd. "This is wrong. You can't just arrest someone for jogging," she exclaimed, her passion igniting a ripple among the spectators. Sarah felt a flicker of hope as she glanced at the gathering crowd, recognizing that they were beginning to see the truth. Mike glanced back, clearly irritated by the growing attention. "Stay back. This is an investigation," he barked, his authority wavering as the crowd pushed closer. The young man recording the incident shouted, "You can't just treat her like this. She has rights." The atmosphere shifted, and Sarah felt a surge of support from the people around her. "Please, everyone, just let me handle this," Mike insisted, but his voice lacked the conviction it had earlier. Sarah held her head high, refusing to let the injustice of the situation define her. She knew that this moment, this confrontation, was about more than just her. It was about the systemic issues that plague society, the biases that influence decisions, and the lives that were often disregarded. As they reached the patrol car, Sarah took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. She was not just a victim, she was a judge, and she would fight back against this unjust treatment. "You will regret this," she thought, her mind racing with the implications of what was happening. This was just the beginning of a challenge not only her, but also the very foundations of the system she served. Interested in hearing how this story unfolds? Join the conversation in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to Change Weavers for more impactful stories. As Sarah stood by the patrol car, the weight of the handcuffs around her wrists felt heavier than ever. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder, a mix of disbelief and outrage, as they processed the scene unfolding before them. Officer Mike Johnson, visibly agitated by the growing attention, struggled to maintain his authority. He glanced over at the onlookers, his expression hardening as he prepared to escalate the situation. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Mike commanded again, his voice sharp and uncompromising. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at his tone, but she remained resolute. "Officer, I have not done anything wrong. You're making a mistake," she asserted, trying to keep her voice steady. The calmness in her demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension in the air, as if she were standing alone against a storm. The crowd, sensing the injustice, began to voice their support for Sarah. "Let her go," shouted a middle-aged man with a determined look. "She's just jogging." Others echoed his sentiments, their calls growing louder, creating a chorus of dissent that surrounded Mike. Yet, he seemed oblivious to the mounting pressure. Instead, he focused solely on Sarah, his mind made up and his judgment clouded by prejudice. "Those are just words, ma'am," he replied, his skepticism unwavering. "You're acting suspiciously, and I have reason to believe you're hiding something." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized her gym bag. "What's in there? Let me see it." Feeling the weight of the moment, Sarah took a deep breath. She understood that this was not really about her. It was a reflection of deeper societal issues. "I assure you, officer, I have nothing to hide. I'm a federal judge, and I know my rights," she stated firmly, her voice carrying an air of authority. The crowd gasped at her revelation, momentarily taken aback. "She's a judge," someone whispered in disbelief. The realization seemed to shift the illuminates of the situation. But Mike remained unyielding, his arrogance blinding him to the truth. "I don't care who you are. You're still under investigation," he insisted, his voice rising. As the bystanders continued to voice their concerns, Sarah felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this was the moment where the truth would prevail, where the support of the community would help her resist the unjust actions of a single officer. "You don't have probable cause," she reiterated, her voice unwavering. "You're violating my rights." Mike's frustration bubbled over. "You're resisting an investigation, and that's an offense in itself," he shouted, his face reddening as he reached for his radio, calling for backup. The crowd erupted in protest, some shouting, "This is an abuse of power," while others urged Mike to reconsider his actions. As more people gathered, their phones still recording, the atmosphere shifted from one of fearful determination to stand against injustice. Sarah could feel the energy around her, a palpable wave of support that bolstered her resolve. She met Mike's gaze, unwavering and defiant. "You won't silence me," she thought, knowing that she had to fight back, not just for herself, but for everyone who had faced similar discrimination. In that moment, Sarah realized their identity as a judge was not merely a title. It was a responsibility to stand against the very injustices she had dedicated her career to fighting. As Mike continued to bark orders, their voices rising in unison, demanding accountability. "Let her go," the crowd chanted, their determination echoing through the streets. Sarah stood tall, a symbol of wisdom, to confront the officer who had misjudged her, and the system that allowed such behavior to persist. Are you keen to see how this story unfolds? Share your insights in the comments, and consider subscribing to Change Weavers for more impactful narratives. As Sarah stood there, handcuffed and surrounded by a growing crowd, the weight of the moment pressed heavily on her. Officer Mike Johnson's face twisted in irritation as he struggled to maintain control over the situation. The chance of support from the onlookers fueled Sarah's resolve, but they also heightened Mike's defensiveness. He turned to her, his voice dripping with condescension. "You think your title makes you above the law? You're just another suspect to me." The words stung, but Sarah refused to let them shake her. She had faced adversity in her career as a judge, but this felt different. This was personal. "Officer, I'm not above the law, I'm here to uphold it," she replied firmly. She could see the disbelief in Mike's eyes. Ahlia was less in a highlighted his assessment from the very beginning. As he continued to question her, Sarah's mind raced. She was acutely aware of the just for herself, but for countless others who had faced similar circumstances. She could see the fear and confusion in the eyes of the bystanders, many of whom were recording the incident on their phones. They were witnessing a confrontation between authority and justice. And Sarah knew she had to stand her ground. "Can't you see you've made a mistake?" she urged him, her voice steady. "You're treating me as if I'm guilty of something when I haven't done anything wrong. This is a violation of my rights." The crowd murmured in agreement, their support palpable as they rallied behind her. A woman in the front row shouted, "You can't just arrest someone without cause." Mike's irritation grew as he realized he was losing control of the narrative. "You can stop with your theatrics," he snapped, stepping closer, his tone aggressive. "I'm conducting an investigation, and you need to cooperate." The tension in the air was thick as Sarah stood her ground, her determination unyielding. "Cooperate with what?" "An unjust accusation," she replied, her voicing above the noise of the crowd. "You have no evidence, no probable cause. This is a blatant misuse of power." The onlookers began to chant again, their voices growing louder. "Let her go! Let her go!" The solidarity of the crowd seemed to embolden Sarah, igniting a fire within her. She knew that standing up to Mike wasn't just about her. It was about challenging a system to occur for far too long. In that moment, Sarah caught sight of Officer Ryan Daniels, a younger cop, who had been watching from a distance. He appeared uneasy, clearly torn between his duty to uphold the law and his growing discomfort with Mike's behavior. Their eyes met briefly, and in that shared glance, Sarah sensed a flicker of understanding. Perhaps there was still hope for a different outcome. Mike's frustration boiled over as he turned to Ryan. "Get back in your car, Daniels. This doesn't concern you," he barked, but Ryan hesitated, his gaze shifting from Mike to Sarah. The crowd continued to shout, their voices a powerful reminder of the community's support for her. "Everyone has a right to be treated with respect," Ryan finally said, stepping forward. His voice was shaky but assertive. "This doesn't look right, Mike. She deserves to be heard." The tension on the situation began to falter. Sarah felt a wave of hope wash over her as Ryan's words echoed through the crowd. Perhaps this young officer would be the ally she needed, someone who could see through the cloud of prejudice that had blinded Mike. Are you curious to see how this story develops? Join the discussion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Change Weavers for more engaging narratives. With the crowd's support surging around her, Sarah felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. Officer Mike Johnson, clearly rattled by the escalating tension, shifted uncomfortably as the chants grew louder. "Let her go! Let her go!" echoed through the streets, creating an atmosphere charged with determination and solidarity. Sarah stood tall, her heart racing but her demeanor calm, knowing that she was not just fighting for herself, but for everyone who had been wronged by systemic injustice. Mike, realizing he was losing control, turned his attention back to Sarah, his voice strained. "You think this is going to intimidate me? I'm just doing my job," he snapped, but the edge in his tone betrayed his uncertainty. The crowd didn't back down, they pressed forward, their an intense investigation to tell what they were watching. "Your job should be to protect and serve, not to intimidate and falsely accuse," Sarah responded, her voice steady and unwavering. She could see the confusion in the faces of the onlookers, and she felt compelled to address them. "I am a federal judge," she declared, her words resonating with authority. "I know my rights, and I will not be silenced." As the crowd murmured in response, a sense of empowerment filled the air. People had gathered not just to witness against an injustice that transcended this single moment. Sarah caught sight of a few familiar faces among the crowd, community members she had interacted with during her time on the bench. Their expressions reflected solidarity, and she felt a surge of strength from their presence. In the midst of this turmoil, Officer Ryan Daniels stepped forward, his brow furrowed with concern. "Mike, this isn't right," he said, his voice low but firm. "You need to reconsider what you're doing." The tension between the two officers was palpable, and Sarah could sense that Ryan was grappling with his conscience. Mike shot Ryan a glare, his patience wearing thin. "Stay out of this, Daniels. You're not the one in charge here," he warned. But Ryan stood his ground, clearly unwilling to let the situation unfold without intervention. "She's not a criminal. You're making a mistake, and you know it." Sarah seized the moment, addressing the crowd once more. "This is about more than just my arrest. It's about a larger issue of racial profiling and the abuse of power that many individuals face every day. We cannot allow this to continue." Her words ignited a wave of energy among the onlookers, who nodded in agreement and shouted their support. Mike, feeling cornered, resorted to his radio again, calling for backup. "I need assistance over here, now," he barked, desperation creeping into his voice. The crowd reacted, their chants growing louder, echoing off the surrounding buildings. "Justice for all! Justice for all!" As they waited for backup to arrive, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of how this moment could become a catalyst for change. She knew that her position as a judge could be leveraged to highlight the injustices faced by countless individuals. "We need to stand up, completing an intense in abuses. It's time for accountability," she urged the crowd, who responded with cheers of encouragement. Moments later, another patrol car pulled up, and 2 additional officers stepped out. The atmosphere shifted as the new officers assessed the situation. One officer, a woman with a calm demeanor, approached Mike. "What's going on here?" she asked, her gaze shifting between Sarah and the growing crowd. As the new officer listened to the escalating situation, Sarah felt a surge of hope. This could be the moment where truth prevailed, and the unjust actions of one officer hit be exposed for what they were. Are you ready to follow this unfolding story? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Change Weavers for more powerful narratives. As the new officers approached the scene, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. The woman in uniform, who had just a sense of calm authority that immediately contrasted with Mike's escalating aggression. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice steady as she assessed the situation. The crowd hushed momentarily, eager to hear how this new officer would handle the unfolding drama. Mike, his frustration palpable, quickly filled her in. "This woman was acting suspiciously while jogging," he said, gesturing to Sarah with a dismissive wave. "I found a receipt on the ground, and she refused to cooperate when I asked her about it." His tone was defensive, as if he were trying to justify his actions to her and the crowd. The new officer raised an eyebrow, her expression skeptical. "A receipt? What's the issue here? Is that really enough to warrant an arrest?" Her question hung in the air, challenging Mike's narrative. The crowd leaned in, their interest keyed by the potential in the conversation. Sarah seized the moment, her voice rising above the murmurs. "Officer, I am a federal judge. I was simply out for a morning jog when I was approached and questioned without any probable cause. I have done nothing wrong." Her words were clear and firm, echoing with authority that demanded attention. The new officer turned to Sarah, her demeanor softening. "Judge Mitchell, I didn't realize who you were. Thank you for clarifying the situation," she said, her tone respectful. "Mike, we need to assess this more carefully. Let's not escalate this further." Mike's face flushed with anger and embarrassment as he realized his actions were being scrutinized. "I was just following procedure," he protested, but the crowd was no longer on his side. They began to voice their discontent again, shouting phrases of support for Sarah and demanding her release. As the tension mounted, the woman officer, introduced as Officer Kelly, stepped closer to Sarah. "Let's just take a moment to discuss what happened here," she suggested, her voice calm and reassuring. "I want to hear your side of the story without any interruptions." Sarah nodded, grateful for the opportunity to explain her perspective without the looming threat of aggression. "Thank you, Officer Kelly. I was simply jogging through my neighborhood when I was stopped. I've been a judge for years, and I understand the law. I know my rights, and I can assure you that this interaction has been unwarranted," she explained, her voice steady and composed. As Sarah spoke, Officer Kelly listened intently, her intense investigation to understanding. The crowd remained engaged, their eyes fixed on the unfolding dialogue. Many had witnessed the injustice of the situation and were eager to see how it would resolve. Meanwhile, Officer Mike stood off to the side, his frustration boiling over. The support Sarah was receiving from the crowd only added to his humiliation. He could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him, and it infuriated him to see his authority being challenged. "Look, Just because she's a judge doesn't mean she's above the law. Mike interjected, attempting to regain some control of the situation. I was doing my job, and she was acting suspiciously. Officer Kelly turned to him, her patience wearing thin. Acting suspiciously doesn't justify an arrest without evidence, Mike. We need to ensure that we're upholding the law fairly, not abusing our power. Her words were firm, signaling a clear stance against Mike's unwarranted aggression. The atmosphere shifted as the crowd began to chant Sarah's name, their voices rising in unity. Sarah! Sarah! The support swelled, filling the air with a sense of empowerment and justice. Sarah felt a surge of strength from the crowd's encouragement, knowing that she was not alone in this fight. Are you eager to see how this story evolves? Join the discussion in the comments and subscribe to Change Weavers for more impactful narratives. The chants of support echoed through the air as Sarah stood tall, surrounded by the crowd that had rallied behind her. The atmosphere was charged with energy, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Officer Kelly, now fully engaged in the situation, shifted her focus back to Sarah, determined to ensure that justice prevailed. Judge Mitchell, let's get to the bottom of this. Officer Kelly said, her voice steady and reassuring. I want to hear your account of what happened, and then we can address any misunderstandings. Her approach was respectful, and Sarah felt grateful to have an ally in this moment. Sarah took a deep breath, her heart racing with the urgency of the situation. Thank you, Officer Kelly. I was jogging in my neighborhood when Officer Johnson approached me. He accused me of being suspicious simply as I was alone and wearing a hoodie. She explained, her tone firm but calm. He found a receipt on the ground, which I confirmed was mine, and instead of listening to my explanation, he immediately escalated the situation. As she spoke, the crowd listened intently, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. Many had experienced similar encounters, so resonated deeply with them. I know my rights, and I understand the law. I felt completely unjustly accused and targeted simply because of my appearance. She continued, her voice growing stronger. Officer Kelly nodded, processing Sarah's account. Thank you for sharing that. It's important for us to acknowledge how biases can influence our perceptions, she said, looking over at Mike, who stood nearby, visibly uncomfortable. We need to ensure that everyone is regardless of their appearance or background. The crowd murmured in agreement, their support for Sarah unwavering. This was more than just an isolated instance of a larger systemic issue that needed to be addressed. Sarah could feel the weight of their collective hope on her shoulders, and she knew that this moment could ignite a change in the community. Meanwhile, Mike shifted his weight, struggling to regain control of the narrative. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just following protocol, he insisted, his voice lacking conviction. But the crowd was no longer on his side, and he could feel their judgment bearing down on him. Officer Kelly turned her attention back to any cake, her expression serious. Following protocol doesn't mean you can disregard someone's rights, Mike. We must ensure that our actions are fair and just. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. We need to reflect on how we approach situations like this. It's critical for us as officers to understand the impact of our actions on the community. As the crowd continued to chant Sarah's name, she felt a surge of empowerment. This moment was about more than just her arrest. It was about shining a light on the injustices that countless individuals faced every day. We need to come together as a community to demand accountability from those in power. She called out, her voice resonating with conviction. I refuse to let this moment be forgotten. Inspired by her words, the crowd erupted in cheers, their voices rising in a chorus of agreement. Justice for all, they shouted, their determination palpable. Sarah felt a sense of connection with the people around her, a shared commitment to fighting for what was right. With Officer Kelly's support, Sarah knew they could push for change. Let's make sure we document everything that happened today, Officer Kelly suggested, her tone pragmatic, and we need to ensure that this incident is civilly investigated, and that those who abuse their power are held accountable. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the scene, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. This was just the beginning of a long fight for justice, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The community had come together, united in their call for change, and Sarah was determined to lead the way. Are you excited to see how this story unfolds? Join the conversation in the comments and subscribe to Change Weavers for more inspiring narratives. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the crowd, Sarah felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was no longer just about her, it was about a movement, a collective call for justice that resonated deeply within the community. With Officer Kelly by her side, she knew she had an opportunity to make a significant impact, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever experienced injustice at the hands of those meant to protect them. Today, we have witnessed something that should never have happened. Sarah began, her voice steady and unwavering as she addressed the crowd. What happened to me is not an isolated incident, it is a reflection of a larger issue that affects many people in our society. We must stand against this injustice. The crowd erupted in applause, their support invigorating her spirit. Officer Kelly stepped forward, nodding in agreement. As law enforcement officers, it is our responsibility to ensure that every individual is treated with dignity and respect. We must acknowledge our biases and work actively to dismantle the systems that allow for discrimination and abuse of power. Her words resonated with the crowd, who listened intently, recognizing the importance of attending within the police force. Sarah continued, her passion igniting the atmosphere. We need to come together as a community to demand change. It starts here and now. We cannot allow this to continue happening to anyone else. She glanced at the faces of those gathered, seeing their determination mirrored in her own. Every voice matters. Each one of us has the power to advocate for justice, to stand up against inequality, and to uplift those who have been silenced. The crowd responded with a chorus of agreement, their chants echoing through the streets. Justice for all, justice for all. Sarah felt a surge of hope as she realized that this moment could be a catalyst for real change. She knew that as a judge, she could leverage her position to bring attention to these issues and advocate for reforms that would prevent future injustices. We need to initiate conversations within our community about bias, about policing, and about justice. We must hold those in power accountable for their actions, Sarah urged, her voice rising above the chants. I will not rest until we see meaningful changes in our system, changes that ensure fairness, equity, and respect for all individuals, regardless of their background. As she spoke, Officer Kelly nodded in agreement, her commitment to the cause evident. We can establish community forums, engage in dialogue, and work together to create a life safer for everyone. She added, it's time for us to listen and learn from one another. The crowd cheered, their energy palpable as they rallied behind Sarah and Officer Kelly's vision for a better future. People began to share their own stories of injustice, and the air filled with a sense of solidarity. Each narrative added to the complexity of the issues at hand, reinforcing the need for change. Sarah felt a sense of responsibility wash over her. Let's organize a community meeting, she proposed. We can invite local leaders, activists, and law enforcement to discuss these issues openly. Together, we can create a platform for change. The crowd erupted in applause, their enthusiasm encouraging her resolve. In that moment, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. She was no longer just a judge. She was now a voice for the voiceless who had been marginalized. The support of her community fueled her determination to make a difference. Are you ready to join us in this fight for justice? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Change Weavers for more inspiring stories that empower change. As the days passed following the rally, the momentum for change began to build within the community. Sarah was determined to turn the energy and support she had witnessed into tangible action. She organized the first community meeting, inviting local leaders, activists, and citizens to come together and discuss issues surrounding policing, racial profiling, and the need for systemic reform. On the evening of the meeting, the community center was filled to capacity. Attendees ranged from concerned residents to local officials, all eager to engage in dialogue about the injustices that had come to light. Sarah stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding with anticipation, as she prepared to address the crowd. She knew the gravity of the moment, and she felt such a responsibility to ensure that their voices were heard. Thank you all for being here tonight, Sarah began, her voice strong and clear. What we have experienced is not just an isolated incident, it is part of a larger pattern of behavior that has affected too many lives in our community. We must confront these issues head-on and work together to create meaningful change. The crowd responded with nods and murmurs of agreement, a testament to their shared commitment to justice. As the discussion unfolded, different voices emerged, each sharing powerful stories of their own experiences with law enforcement. A young man being stopped and searched without cause while walking home from school. An elderly woman recounted how her grandson had been treated unfairly during a routine traffic stop. Each narrative echoed the same message: there was a seated issue that needed to be addressed. Sarah listened intently, her heart heavy with the weight of their stories. These experiences highlight the urgent need for reform in our policing practices, she said, her voice resolute. We need to advocate for policy changes with accountability and transparency within our police department. The discussions led to the formation of a community task force, completing intense in the systemic issues within local law enforcement. Sarah took on a leadership role, determined to ensure that the voices of those were not only heard but actively included in the decision-making process. As the task force began its work, they quickly made intense investigation. They quickly heard numerous complaints against Officer Mike Johnson and others within the department, detailing patterns of racial profiling and excessive force. The findings shocked many, but for those who had experienced it firsthand, it was a painful confirmation of their reality. Mike Johnson's actions are not just his own. They reflect a culture within the department that tolerates such behavior, Sarah stated during a task force meeting. If we want to create real change, we need to address these issues at their core. The group agreed, and they began to strategize on how to present their findings to the community and local government officials. As the task force continued its work, they organized town halls, inviting community members to engage in discussions about the issues at hand. Sarah emphasized the importance of transparency and communication, encouraging residents to voice their concerns and ideas for reform. The response was overwhelming, with more people attending each meeting, eager to contribute. Meanwhile, public awareness of Sarah's story continued to grow. Media outlets picked up on the developments, highlighting the community's efforts to confront systemic issues. Support poured in from neighboring towns and cities, as people rallied behind the call for justice. Sarah realized that they were not alone. This was a movement that transcended borders, uniting people in the fight for equality. As the task force prepared to present their findings to local officials, Sarah felt a mix of hope and apprehension. They were on the brink of something significant, and she knew that their efforts could lead to real change. This is just the beginning, she told her fellow task force members. We have the power to make a difference and to hold those in authority accountable for their actions. Are you excited to see how the fight for justice continues? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Change Weavers for more inspiring stories and updates on this movement. The day of the city council meeting arrived with an air of anticipation. The council chambers were packed with citizens spilling out into the hallway, all eager to witness what could be a turning point for their community. Sarah stood at the podium, her shoulders squared, ready to present the findings of the task force. Behind her, rows of supporters filled the seats, their presence a testament to the movement's growing strength. Distinguished council members, community leaders, and fellow citizens, Sarah began, her voice steady and clear. Over the past few weeks, our task force has uncovered a pattern of behavior within our police department that cannot be ignored. What happened to me was not an isolated incident, but part of a systemic issue that has affected many lives in our community. She paused, letting her words sink in as she looked around the room, making eye contact with those who had shared their stories with her. The presentation was comprehensive, detailing multiple accounts of racial profiling, excessive force, and abuse of power. The evidence was undeniable and documented incidents. As Sarah spoke, the council members' expressions shifted from skepticism to concern about completing an intense investigation. We are not here to vilify our entire police force, Sarah emphasized, her tone measured. Many officers serve with honor and integrity. However, We listen intense investigations of those who abuse their power and the systems that enable them. The crowd murmured in agreement, their support palpable in the charged atmosphere. When it came time for Officer Mike Johnson to speak, the room fell silent. He approached the podium, visibly uncomfortable, his confidence now replaced with uncertainty. "I've had time to reflect on my actions," he began, his voice strained. "I made assumptions based on biases I didn't even realize I had. I was wrong." His admission, though difficult, marked a crucial step toward accountability. The council members engaged in a heated discussion, weighing the evidence and considering the task force's recommendations. The proposed reforms included mandatory bias training for all officers, community oversight committees, and a comprehensive review of departmental policies. The debate was intense, but Sarah could sense a shift in the room, a willingness to acknowledge the problems and work toward solutions. As the meeting progressed, community members stepped forward to share their experiences, each story adding weight to the call for change. A young woman tearfully recounted how her brother had been wrongfully detained, while an elderly man described the fear he felt whenever he saw a police car in his neighborhood. Their voices, once silenced, now echoed through the chambers, demanding to be heard. The council's decision came after hours of deliberation. They would implement the task force's recommendations and establish a permanent community oversight committee to monitor police practices. It wasn't a complete victory, but outside the chambers, as the sun began to set, Sarah addressed the crowd of supporters who had gathered to hear the outcome. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for our community," she announced, her voice filled with determination. "We have been heard and change is coming. But our work is far from over. We must remain vigilant, continue to advocate for justice, and hold our leaders accountable." The crowd erupted in cheers, their faces alight with hope and determination. This was not just about one incident or one officer, it was about transforming a system that had failed too many for too long. As Sarah looked out at the sea of faces, she felt a profound sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be challenging to face it together, united in their pursuit of justice and equality. Are you inspired by this story of community action and justice? Join us in the movement for change by sharing your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Subscribe to Change Weavers for more powerful stories that illuminate the path toward a more just and equitable society.